The park was supposed to release a statement about the third kid going missing, but because there wasn't quite enough evidence that it happened on company grounds, technically they didn't have to, so they didn't. Obviously, it would have been a PR nightmare if news spread that 3 kids in total had gone missing at the theme park. I felt terrible for the missing kids. All the employees did. But no one wanted to cause a stir because the park employs about 70% of the people who live on this tiny island. That's right. The theme park is confined to a tiny Japanese island that has become the de facto economy here. No tourism means no pay for anyone. Being the only Westerner on staff, I really didn't want to be the self-righteous white dude who thought he could solve everything. But of course, Aiko, my girlfriend who got me the job in the first place, had other ideas. Ideas that led me to uncover, well, a horrific conspiracy involving kidnapping, body snatching, and basically unexplainable shit that I think is probably aliens. If you already don't believe me, you can stop reading. I won't judge you. But regardless of what you think, I will lay out everything as it happened chronologically, as clearly as I can. Perhaps after reading this, you might be willing to get involved. You could help me find Aiko. I hope she's still alive. I was an English teacher in Tokyo between 2022 and 2023. That's where I met Aiko, who was the receptionist at my school. She was a smart, hard-working girl who always wore different eyeglasses with cartoons on the rims. Toward the end of my employment, I gathered enough courage to convince my pasty self to ask her out on a date. Somehow, to my very own welcome surprise, this first date turned into several more dates. I don't want to delve too deep into our relationship, but you should know that I liked her a lot. I probably would have told Aiko that I loved her if everything continued as normal. If you can read this, Aiko, I love you. Aiko was the first person I had met who could speak English as well as me, and liked all the same anime as I did. She was also the one who invited me to work at the summer job on her hometown island. A job at the theme park. For our purposes, I will call it Bakery Park. I'm not going to reveal the actual name or location of the park because I don't want to disparage the island locals. It's a very peculiar place. It started as just a tiny bake shop which sold delicious cakes made by hand. But after a news article in the 80s, the popularity blew up. And like all things in Japan, the bake shop created adorable cake characters to increase the appeal for children and families. Soon, staff wore the cake characters as mascot costumes. And following that, they built the merry-go-round and pirate ship ride. One thing led to another, and now we have every Tokyo local's favorite little secret. Aiko and I started working in May 2023 as general laborers, which meant we were greeting people, cleaning areas, doing the recycling, that sort of thing. I really enjoyed working there for the first 2 months because I was able to practice my Japanese in public, and the summer weather was amazing. But then the third kid went missing. The third kid in like a span of 6 months, apparently. There was a real concern that could be felt among the staff. And people were worried that there was some kind of serious human trafficking or serial kidnapping going on. But we'd all been explicitly instructed to let the island authorities take care of it. We could not let word spread among the guests. So I did as I was instructed and didn't get involved. Why ruffle feathers when there were professionals to handle something right? Well, Aiko saw things differently. I'm going to try and find him, Aiko told me one fateful evening. What? I'm going to try and find the third kid. We were in the employee mess hall. One of the big perks of working here is that everyone ate together at the end of the day. They already searched for the boy, I said. They're coming through the forest now. I don't think he's in the forest, Aiko whispered. I think he's stuck in the heat beneath the pirate ship. Beneath Bakery Park's pirate ship was a sea of blue tarps, which were actually covering tons of old props and discarded junk. Why would he go in there? He's a kid, I don't know. Maybe he thought that's where he could find a rare flavor. I scoffed, but it could have been true. All the kids with their phones were constantly looking for cartoon nutmeg and vanilla sticks to complete their virtual cakes on Bakery Park Hunt. It was the park's trendy AR app riding on the coattails of Pokemon Go. We're not supposed to look for the kid, Aiko. It's going to make everyone uncomfortable. That's why I'm going at midnight, she said. Are you coming or not? Of course, I had to join. On top of everything else, it was Aiko who was allowing me to stay at her aunt's cottage on the island. The last thing I wanted to do was return to Aiko's aunt and give some excuse of where Aiko was supposed to be. I was a bad liar in English, and in Japanese, I was truly god-awful. Somewhere around 11:30 p.m., we snuck our way past the front gates, skirting around all of the security cameras. All of the animatronics looked creepy. The normally cheery Chef Choco Ducky, who would blow bubbles at the entrance, was now this dead, scary statue, leaking soap water from its mouth. And the pastry pig guy, I always forgot his name, who would usually give friendly waves to everyone, instead had his arms frozen in a pleading prayer, as if to say, "Help me. Please, don't leave me here." We stuck to the shadowy rear of the attractions until we came across the pirate ship in question. It was a massive boat, attached only by a single swinging joint above the blue tarp ocean. Aiko lifted one of the tarp flaps and directed me inside. It was a massive crawl space about the height of a child. I could see why she thought this was where the kids would go hunting for flavors on their phones. My flashlight illuminated many rows of support beams, the kind you would find under bleachers. I could see old food carts laying on their sides, and wooden signs that read takoyaki and fried chicken. Okay, let's stick together and cover the whole area, Aiko said. Let's go row by row. Let's do it. I gave my standard Western thumbs up. We checked under every shadowy nook. There were tons of cutouts of smiling mascots and old cardboard stands of desserts to peek under, but all we found were cobwebs. The kid's name was Kato, so we went by each row calling, "Kato-kun, can you hear me? Kato-kun, everyone's looking for you." We searched most of the place, but didn't find anything. That is, until Aiko pointed out a hole in the tarp. It was child-sized and led outside towards the entrance of the confection showroom. Could the kid have wandered in there? I asked. We have to check. The confection showroom was slated to open a while ago, but COVID had delayed it. And now the park's been struggling to compete with inflation, so it put the confection showroom and other future attractions on hiatus, even if they were partially built. Aiko tried her keycard at the door, but it wouldn't work. We circled the hexagonal building and found a side entrance. It was also closed. Guess not, I shrugged. Wait, let's check for flavors. Aiko took out her phone and opened Bakery Park Hunt. On her screen appeared a crappily animated candy cane. It was dancing on the moonlit gravel by Aiko's feet. Peppermint. She proceeded to tap her screen, collecting bits and pieces of the candy. So is that a rare flavor? Yes, usually only obtainable on Christmas. She followed the cane as it bounced behind weeds and circled the building. It shouldn't even be here right now. I followed skeptically. So the app is glitching? She tapped her screen, chipping away at the flavor. The biggest reason Aiko liked to work here was the novelty, of course. Sure, the pay was mediocre, and sure, the park was run down. But the board still released new interactive desserts each season, as well as new characters. If you could get past the sun-bleached decor and occasional graffiti, you could see there was a lot of passion in creating a world that kids could enjoy. Look, he's climbing the door. Aiko showed me her phone, and I could see the virtual candy cane skitter up the front entrance door. It phased through solid metal. I went up and tried pushing on the handle. This time, the door opened. Whoa. Did you know that was going to happen? Aiko checked her phone. No idea. I had heard the app used to interact with the park, but this is the first time I've seen it. Before going inside, I grabbed a big stick to wedge open the door, to make sure we didn't get locked in. We both entered side by side, painting the darkness with our yellowy flashlights. In the middle was a lowered floor composed of LED panels arranged into a circle, all facing upwards. Guardrails surrounded this floor, leading you around the circumference. Aiko aimed her phone along the perimeter. There were little displays of cakes, quiches, and statues of Chef Choco Ducky. "That peppermint is gone," she said, a little disappointed. "Do you think it could have lured that little boy in here as well?" Lured. That's an English word I had taught her last weekend, when we came across fishermen at the island lake. I mean, yeah, if the cane unlocked the door for us, maybe he also lured Kato. I looked up at the ceiling and spotted dome cameras. Is it possible security can see into this place? Aiko shrugged. She was as confused as I was. We walked until we reached the opposite end, where a washroom seemed to be located. Then a rumbling came from the ground. This is the point where I wished we had just run away. If we had left the building alone and abandoned the search, I wouldn't even be writing this story. But instead, we both aimed our lights at the room's center, where some of the LED panels activated. That's when we saw the projection. A white, sugar-puffed tanuki appeared above the floor. It was none other than Bakery Park's premier mascot, Mashumaro. Usually, Mashu had a pumped-up, jovial demeanor. I was accustomed to seeing his happy animatronic version bowing near the park entrance. But here, above the showroom's LEDs, he floated listlessly, staring out of empty eye sockets. Half of his face was missing from poor pixelation, and his voice sounded deep and distorted. Subtitles floated below him as he moaned in Japanese. "Welcome to Bakery Park." Aiko turned away, frightened by the sight, whereas I couldn't stop staring. What the hell? Detecting my English, Mashumaro floated up towards me. Bits of him kept peeling off, revealing a wireframe skeleton underneath. "Hello, James Naka, employee 604373. Welcome to orientation." It sounded like he was speaking from the bottom of a dark, sorrowful well. "Today you will learn how to save one's soul, and how timesheets work." Without saying anything, Aiko and I walked backwards, edging our way towards the main door. Mashumaro followed us by the railing. "Question 1. Each employee must ensure they are wearing what type of garment?" Gigantic red numbers appeared behind the tanuki. A countdown started at 30 seconds. When we reached the entrance, the door slammed on its own, splitting the twig I had left there. Shit. The numbers were growing brighter and brighter. The loud rumbling returned to the ground. I cleared my throat and looked at the projection. The answer is, we need to wear an apron uniform and, name tag? Ding! The numbers vanished. The floor panels lit up, and a smile spread across Mashumaro's broken face. "Correct. Be sure to wash your uniforms regularly." Aiko tried scanning her keycard to exit, but it wasn't working. She tried again. "Now, can anyone guess where the lost child is located for all employees?" We gave up on the door and continued along the railing, looking for another way out. The numbers grew brighter as the countdown lowered. In the last 10 seconds, we had to squint to keep walking. Aiko yelled, "Here! The lost child is being kept here, isn't it?" The power suddenly faded. Even Mashumaro disappeared. Electrical arcs shot up from the LEDs. Sparks fell from the ceiling. We both ducked into a little alcove, shielding our heads. For a moment, it seemed like something was going to explode. "Correct! This is the confection showroom." The mascot appeared above the floor. This time it was projected at a massive size. His marshmallow body was shining white light in all directions. "Final question. What is the name of everyone's favorite captured boy? Any guesses? He's sweet and puffy." We reached what we believed was the employee washroom and tried to jiggle the handle. It was locked. Mashumaro became a pixelated blur of intersecting shapes. I couldn't tell what was supposed to be his face. The countdown timer was starting to get blinding again. "Kato," I shouted. "The boy's name is Kato." The white blurriness suddenly sharpened to a resolute creature. Masumaro looked photoreal above the LEDs. He grinned immensely, with numerous sharp teeth in his soft, white mouth.
"James Naka, congratulations! You are now a proud team member of Bakery Park. As a show of your appreciation, here is your null object."
The washroom door beside us popped open. A small, limp shape tumbled out. It was a child. Aiko gasped and bent down, holding the little boy's arm, protecting his head. I watched as the LEDs faded. The alarmingly real Masumaro smiled at me and slowly flickered out of existence. Some text appeared below him. "Kindness is never wasted." Then we were in complete darkness again. I turned on both our flashlights. "Is he dead?" Aiko held hands to her mouth. "Why are his eyes open?" The child looked unconscious, yet somehow his eyes were open. Unnaturally wide open. And he was smiling? Even I had to look away for a second. It was truly disturbing. Aiko tried to close the boy's eyes, but couldn't. She patted his chest. "I can't tell if he's breathing." I bent down and lifted him up, cradling him in my arms. Although he was unconscious, it felt like he was looking right at me with a pair of open, demonic eyes. A sinister flesh doll. I ignored the revulsion and peered through the open bathroom. I could see yet another door. "Come this way, before everything locks again." We scurried out the side exit until we were outside the building. I remember the night breeze being a welcome relief. Aiko grabbed her phone and dialed immediately. "We need to get him to a hospital." The child felt very warm in my arms. Feverish. Though I wasn't sure if that meant he was alive or if it was just leftover heat from the building. I tried to close his eyes and wipe that smile away, but his eyelids wouldn't budge, and his lips were completely rigid. Aiko contacted the island's emergency services. Very quickly, she explained we had a child in a critical state and arranged for a vehicle to pick us up at the park entrance. She was in the middle of giving our names when two men suddenly appeared from the shadows. They shouted in Japanese, "Intruders, halt!" Aiko and I both froze. She dropped her phone to the ground. They were the night guards, and they both pointed far more powerful flashlights at our faces. I was tongue-tied and held out the boy, as if that would solve everything. Aiko lifted her hands up as a show of compliance. After a tense moment, the guards approached and Aiko calmly explained what had just happened. The security men listened, but did not seem particularly interested. The taller guard lifted the child from my arms and commanded me to fall to my knees. I complied. "You're both suspects," the shorter guard said. "Suspects?" Aiko flashed her keycard. "We're both employees. An ambulance is on its way. We need to get this boy to a hospital." They argued in Japanese, too fast for me to fully understand. The gist I got was that the guards wanted to detain us, but Aiko was demanding to accompany the boy to the ER. During that argument, I kept looking at the boy in the guard's arms, at that menacing smile. Behind the boy's neck, I think I saw needle marks. Each time I glanced back at the child, I swear the eyes were looking right at me, frozen in a new position. Eventually, a deal was struck. I would be detained in some holding area in Bakery Park, while Aiko could join the other guard as they got into the ambulance with the boy. I didn't love the idea of a holding area, but I wanted to save this boy. It was still a boy, right? Things happened fast after that, and I'll try to recount them as best as I can. First, we marched up to the park's entrance, meandering through the attractions under the pallid moonlight. I remember I did not find any of the animatronics scary anymore. Second, my real fear was not knowing what was going to happen to me in that holding area the guards were proposing. I remember lagging behind, staring at the child's freakishly open eyes. 3rd, we reached the end of the road, and I saw a pink van. A bakery park van, not an ambulance. Its engine was running. The driver explained he would take Aiko and the boy to the island helipad, where an emergency helicopter would transport them to a proper hospital in Shimoda, a 20-minute flight off the island. It was suspicious as hell, and I wish we had resisted and argued more, but we had a boy who needed to get to a hospital. So, Aiko agreed and got in. As she entered the vehicle, Aiko turned to me and said, "Tell my auntie where I'm going, and tell her that we saved a kid." That's when both guards turned especially sour. The one holding my arm shouted, "You will not tell anyone where you found the boy. Is that clear?" Aiko and I exchanged dumbfounded expressions. Neither of us were sure how to respond. "Repeat after me. The boy was found in the woods. The boy was found in the woods." The guard's hand tightened around my arm. I could see the guard accompanying Aiko doing the same. Like a pair of robots, we both uttered, "The boy was found in the woods." The guards both leered and made us repeat it a few more times. We did. The smiling boy was laid prone on the back seat, his eyes wide open as ever. I waved goodbye to Aiko, for what I didn't realize would be the last time. If I could change anything, it would be to pull her out of that van and run. I really wish I had. But instead, I remember saying, "I'll see you later," with a hopeful smile. I stood limply as the van shut its doors and drove away. Moments later, it was just me and the tall guard, standing by the park entrance. The night had grown cold. "Show me the back of your hand," the guard said. He sounded tired and annoyed to be out this late. I did as he asked and exposed the back of my palm. He removed a small object, a stamp, from one of his pockets, and then applied it to my skin. It might have been the night chill, but I remember my hand felt like it was being mildly shocked by a numbing agent, as if the stamp had an electrical charge or something. When he was finished, I withdrew my hand and cradled it. The pain receded. "Where did you find the boy?" the guard asked with finality. "The woods. I found the boy in the woods." He let out a small, weak laugh, then turned his flashlight back on and walked back into the park. "Go home." Home? No holding area? I was shocked and relieved. I remember at that point I had so much adrenaline running through me that I bowed like 4 times. The guard didn't care. I started on my way back to Aiko's aunt's house, thinking about how I was going to explain everything. As I left, I rubbed my palm and observed the new marking that stained it. Forest. It was the stamp that visitors received when they paid to enter the island's protected forest. The guard was enforcing an alibi. I found the boy in the woods. I found the boy in the woods. This was the story I was forced to tell everyone. Previously, my girlfriend Aiko and I had rescued a missing child. You might think I deserve to feel like a hero, that I might be filled with pride or honor. But instead, my chest tightened with a damp, foreboding heaviness. The kid did not look right. His eyes were permanently open, and his lips were frozen in a sinister smile. I know it might have been some crazy symptom of paralysis, but seeing the boy like that just felt so off. Aiko was worried about him too, so she joined his late-night ambulance ride to keep an eye on his breathing. That night, I walked back to my accommodations at Aiko's aunt's cottage, and I wished the story would just wrap up there. Just a nice, "We were heroes. End of adventure." But it only got much worse. You see, my phone started getting random notifications from the theme park app, the application called Bakery Park Hunt. I was walking home, in the middle of sending encouraging texts to Aiko, trying to help her feel brave for her emergency ride, when my phone bombarded me with, "Cinnamon nearby. Would you like to pick some?" I clicked on it, and immediately my phone entered camera mode, showcasing the dirty road at my feet. A cartoon stick of cinnamon walked into frame. "Follow me, please." I didn't feel like playing the Pokemon Go knockoff, so I closed the application. But that didn't stop my phone from opening back up and pinging me ceaselessly. "Cinnamon nearby. Vanilla nearby. Saffron. Rare nearby." It was enough to kill the battery and end my communication with Aiko completely. So I did the only thing I could. I snuck back into my room at the cottage and went to sleep. I woke up to the smell of green tea drifting through my room. Out of habit, I peered to my left to see if Aiko was awake, but her bed was as empty and unmade as she left it. On my phone, I could see several messages from her. 1:04 a.m. Remember to tell Nana. 1:06 a.m. Can't text more. Guard. 1:32 a.m. We're at helipad. 1:45 a.m. The paramedic says the boy is stable. He's alive. I can't believe we actually saved someone. It's like the movies. We did it. We saved his life. 1:50 a.m. I didn't want to be around that guard, so I took the paramedic's offer and I'm taking the last seat in the helicopter. I can act as a placeholder guardian. 2:07 a.m. I feel so much better being away from those guards. 2:08 a.m. Tell Nana I'll be at the General Hospital in Shimoto. I should be back in 1 to 2 days. 2:10 a.m. I'm so sorry they put you in that holding cell. It's unfair you're in that jail. I hope they don't keep you there long. 2:11 a.m. But forget those stupid guards. They don't know what they're doing. Let me know when they let you go, please. I hope they treat you okay. I wish I had a chance to respond to these messages. Aiko still thought the other guard had taken me under arrest. Thankfully, that wasn't the case. 2:14 a.m. Wow, the view is beautiful from up here. I'm so sorry for dragging you through all this, but it was worth it. We saved the boy. The medics say he's going to live. He's in some kind of shock, but he will live. 2:16 a.m. I promise no more adventures like this again. I don't want you to get into trouble. I don't want the police to get involved. 2:20 a.m. I didn't even think about how this could affect your visa. I am so stupid. What a mess. I'm so sorry. I feel terrible. Please text me as soon as you're free. I know they probably took your phone away. 2:27 a.m. It was my idea to save the boy. I'll tell them I forced you to help me. I'll make everything my fault. 3:06 a.m. Made it to the hospital. They're giving me a room. I hope to hear from you soon. 6:05 a.m. The boy's family is here, and yes, we were right. It is Kato. This is crazy. 6:07 a.m. Mom and son reunited. Attached was a photo of Kato in a hospital bed, hooked up to some kind of respirator. His mother was there, in tears, but clearly happy to be able to hold her boy's hand again. I don't normally gush over this kind of stuff, but it honestly warmed my heart. 6:10 a.m. Text me, please. I'm so worried about everything. I did text her. I explained my phone had died and that I wasn't in any jail. I told her that I was happy she was okay and that she could text me throughout the day. More than anything, I wanted to hear her voice, so I said to call at any time. That sunken feeling in my chest had lifted a little. Maybe things weren't so bad. In the kitchen, Aiko's aunt was already working on her Sudoku. There was an egg and rice meal waiting on 2 different placemats at the table. I remember it feeling very strange to have a morning alone with Nana Obasan, especially after such a weird night. I didn't really know what I was allowed to share yet, so I did my best to keep my composure. "Good morning, Nana," I said. "Good morning." Her focus was on solving one of the columns. I tried to word my 5th grade Japanese in a way that could explain what had happened without scaring or alarming Nana. Eventually, halfway through my breakfast, I produced my declaration. "Nana, you should know that last night, Aiko and I saved a child who had gone missing. We called for help and an ambulance took the child away. Aiko was the real hero, and even accompanied the child on the helicopter ride. She's currently at Shamato Hospital, and she says she'll be back in 1 to 2 days. I held up my phone to show her the text, but quickly realized she couldn't read our English exchanges. So I lowered the phone and said, "She texted me all this in English, but you can call her if you want." Nana lowered her tea and looked at me briefly above her reading glasses. I think she believed me, but she only really seemed to focus on the tail end of my speech. "So, Aiko's coming back in a few days?" "Yes." She went back to her Sudoku. "Okay." Although Nana Obasan may not have appreciated what happened last night, I kept replaying events in my head in total disbelief, focusing on the positive. Aiko's hunch proved true. We had saved a kid. We were heroes. I avidly reread all of Aiko's texts, imagining her typing them. There was a flutter in my chest from the anticipation of hearing more. I took a shortcut rounding the forest edge to get to work. I still had a shift at Bakery Park today, and I felt it was critical not to show up late. I'm sure I would be asked a dozen questions about last night, and would have to explain Aiko's absence. As I walked along the gravel road, I tried to get my story straight. I would focus on the good news. Aiko and I had rescued a kid, for God's sake. Surely that would render our trespassing meaningless. Did anyone actually care that we had snuck into the park late? Then my phone chirped. "Candy floss nearby. Would you like to pick some?" For fuck's sake. I clicked to close the app, but couldn't. Suddenly I was staring at a polygonal version of Bakery Park's premier mascot. It was Mashumaro, the marshmallow tanuki. Just like in the confection showroom, half his face was missing. It's like his pixelated skin couldn't quite cover his skeleton wireframe. He was dancing in a field of cotton candy. His voice was garbled, yet loud enough to pique my phone's speaker.
"James Naka, employee number 604373. Hello."
I tried to turn the volume down on my phone, but the interface was frozen.
"Thanks for playing with me last night."
The virtual mascot found a way to hijack my phone. None of my buttons worked. I freaked out a little. I even yelled without meaning to. "Stop! Stop this!" The virtual mascot's smile lengthened. He switched to English.
"Stop what? Aren't you glad you saved little Kaito's soul?"
I was surrounded by nothing but trees, and the gravel beneath my feet. It was just me and this digital nightmare. I was irrationally afraid, but I covered it up with anger. "Who the fuck are you?" The tanuki waggled his rear towards the camera, grabbing cotton candy from the field.
"That's a little rude. I don't talk to rude boys."
"Are you a hacker? Are you kidnapping kids at Bakery Park?" Using the cotton candy as pom-poms, Mashumaro danced to the left and right, performing a little Macarena.
"You better not be so mean next time. Or else."
The app closed immediately. My phone returned to my home screen. I tried to open it again, but all that loaded was a benign-looking inventory. It said I had collected candy floss. Jesus Christ, what was that? It seemed to me like there might be some nefarious hacking happening. Like some terrorist had been able to exploit software at Bakery Park to capture a kid in the first place. And now he was trying to manipulate me. The thought chilled my bones. And it was possible that this was the same hacker who was responsible for kidnapping the other two missing children. If that was true, who knows how many future kids could still be at risk? I decided I would have to tell the park staff my whole story. Everything. Children's lives could be at stake. I typed out last night's events in English on my phone, converting it as coherently as possible into Japanese. For 2 years, I had taught how to assemble speeches and essays for high schoolers in Tokyo, so it was about time I wrote my own. Whether or not Mashumaro could still spy on my phone and see what I was doing, it didn't matter to me. Let him see. Let him be afraid. All this disorder had to stop. I arrived at the entrance to Bakery Park just before my shift was supposed to start, A big, bowing animatronic of Mashumaro in an apron greeted me by the front gate. His eyes had the typical upside-down V's of anime joy. Normally, this bowing statue would pep me up a little, making me excited to start my day, but today it only gave me goosebumps. Without wasting time, I beelined to the employee check-in station. I wanted to tell my supervisor I had important news regarding the confection showroom. I had a whole, concise speech written out. As if reading my mind, the supervisor actually came to me after I punched in.
Naka-san, good morning. I want you to follow me. You're wanted at the head office.
All my training had been at the Welcome Center, so I had never actually been at the head office. Unlike the rest of the park, with its pink, yellow, or other candy-colored buildings, the corporate building was unapologetically beige, hidden behind trees. My supervisor took me past the lobby, and we rode the elevator to the top floor, where we arrived at an empty reception area in front of a couple of offices.
Wait for a minute. I'll let them know you're here.
I sat as straight and still as possible. I was about to silence my phone so I didn't get a ping during the meeting when I received one more text from Aiko. 9:12 a.m. Something is wrong with Kato. He's making weird, guttural sounds that the doctors don't understand. And he's talking now, but in an old man voice. Like a really old man voice. He keeps saying, "More will come. More will come." I'm really scared. The parents are angry with me. They think I did something to their son. They're not letting me leave. Huh? I quickly messaged back. Kato's parents aren't letting you leave? What do you mean? A minute passed. Then another. I was glued to the screen, checking for at least a check mark. A confirmation to see if Aiko had at least read my text. Nothing. The door into the largest office opened.
Please come in.
It was the tall guard from last night who ushered me in. The one who was supposed to put me in a holding place. My gut contorted with so much stress that my intestines may have formed a balloon animal. Instead of his night guard uniform, he was now wearing a brown suit and tie. He introduced himself as Kaiben, which literally translates to security guard. I was imagining a small desk and a window, something akin to a school principal's office. But instead, I had walked into an enormous penthouse suite with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the layout of Bakery Park. It smelled like coffee, cigarettes, and a weaker version of the same sweet scent they pumped throughout the whole park.
Welcome to Sadhu-san's office.
Kaiben gestured wide. Mr. Sadhu stood facing one of the large windows, coffee cup in hand. He was a short man, wearing big horn-rimmed glasses, slacks, and a dress shirt. No tie. I proceeded to bow, deeply and formally. I knew how important decorum was in Japanese office culture. Sadhu moved to go sit at his desk and dismissed my gesture as if it were unnecessary. He pointed at the many chairs close to him.
Come, please join me.
Myself and Kaiben followed. As I sat, I noticed the walls were overloaded with framed newspapers, magazines, and articles, all featuring glowing praise for Bakery Park. The majority looked quite old.
So, I heard you were quite the savior last night, yes?
Mr. Sadhu said, topping up his cup. Yes, we found a missing boy, is all I managed to say. Kaiben must have told his boss all about the events of last night.
Good. We want to make sure our guests feel safe on the island. Quite important, don't you think?
Of course. Yes.
And when the guests feel safe on our island, they will keep coming back to our park, yes?
Yes. He was keeping the Japanese slow and simple for my sake, which I appreciated. But it also made me feel like a 4-year-old.
And it would be bad to start any unnecessary rumors, yes?
Yes.
Because we don't want to scare our guests, right?
Kaiben turned in his seat to look at me. He reached into his jacket's breast pocket and pulled out some cigarettes. The corners of my phone dug into my thigh, as if the speech I had written was nudging me. I smoothed my pants. No, we don't want to scare our guests. That would be bad. A cigarette was lit. Mr. Sadhu continued. It is regrettable that we've also had children go missing on the island. But unfortunately, that's what we get with an untamed forest, and free-spirited parents who let their little ones run wild. I've had my bakery park scoured many times for them. Sadhu took a sip of his coffee, and briefly glanced out the window. Obviously, we would release a statement if a guest had been confirmed missing at our park, but so far there has simply not been any evidence. Has there, Kaiben? Kaiben took a slow drag. He spoke without exhaling the smoke. None. So, Naka-san, tell me. Mr. Sadhu leaned forward on his desk. I could see two tiny, hunched versions of myself in his glasses. Where exactly did you find the missing child last night? I opened my mouth, then closed it. My phone felt like it weighed 20 pounds. We found the boy crumpled on the ground, unconscious, I think. It became very quiet. The AC unit had cycled off. I looked at my hands, at the stamp I was forcefully given last night on the back of my palm. Forest. I could feel both of their eyes scanning me up and down, searing through me. He was in the middle of the forest. Kaiben exhaled a long plume of tobacco. Mr. Sadhu leaned back in his chair. Well, thank goodness you went looking. Very noble of you. I can see that you have the Forest Reserve's official ink brand. So that all adds up. Yes, it does. Sadhu lifted his cup and nodded back. I had no clue I was employing such selfless heroes at my company. How long have you been working here? I looked up and pointed to myself. Me? About 2 months? Sadhu drank deeply from his cup, emptying the whole thing. Then he circled the rim with his finger, playing with some thought. Well, Naka-san, you have proven to be very exemplary in your short time being here. I have a new position that would be very well suited to a Westerner, actually. If it interests you. What do you mean? Sadhu looked over at Kaiben and released a small laugh. I mean exactly what I say. There was something in the Japanese I wasn't understanding. The small man reached into his desk drawer and pulled out some paper covered in kanji. He scribbled something along the bottom, then inscribed his signature. How would you like a promotion? In the elevator down, I had trouble processing what had just happened. Had I been bribed? Is this what a bribe feels like? I held on to what I assumed was my new contract, and tried to make out the characters. I could read Bakery Park and change of wage. It looked like they were going to pay me triple what I was making before. But was this good news, or had I agreed to something terrible? I didn't know who I could trust at this park anymore. The person I needed to talk to was Aiko. I checked to see if she had responded to my message. It was still unread. My fingers started texting a follow-up. If she didn't respond by noon, I would try calling her on my break. Before I could hit send, however, I got a notification from Bakery Park Hunt. Molasses nearby. Would you like to save another soul? Once again, I was staring at a polygonal version of Mashumaro. His head hadn't loaded properly, so it was just his smiling face floating above his torso. His body was backstroking through a well-rendered brown liquid, reflecting white light.
James Naka, employee number 604373. Hello. Thank you for signing the contract.
What? I said in English first, to which Mashumaro didn't react, so I repeated it in Japanese. What are you talking about? The screen turned blinding white.
You work for me now.
The whole elevator shook. I grabbed the railings. Then, without any warning, the elevator dropped, I was tossed about a foot in the air. For a few punctuated moments, all was weightless. Then I landed hard on my back. The lights went out. I'm not normally claustrophobic, but in this situation, I was hit with an intense fear that something was going to cave in on me. I hugged my knees and curled up in the corner. A weird, familiar chirping sound came out of my phone, stabbing and prying out some old memory that I couldn't quite place. After lying curled for a few minutes, I snatched the device and saw that the headless 3D model of Mashumaro was howling with laughter. Then I placed the noise. It was the sound effect of a character laughing in Animal Crossing. A repetitive little chirp. "Please, tell me," I asked in Japanese. "Who are you?"
Aiko was a very good helper. Will you help us too?
The mention of Aiko riveted me to the floor. I stared at the screen, unblinking. "What do you know about Aiko?"
I messaged her about the kid too. She was so eager to help.
My heart sank. Was Mashumaro the whole reason she wanted to go searching for the kid last night? Was she being manipulated by this creature on her phone? "You messaged her last night?" The Tanuki dove into the shimmering lake of molasses. When he popped back up, his head had finally loaded.
Follow me and you will see.
Mashumaro swam up to a beachy shore, where he sat up and blew a kiss at the camera. The scene ended and the app flashed, "You have collected molasses." I tried to swipe back to Mashumaro, but he was gone. The app just showed me a virtual jar of molasses next to cotton candy. The lights turned on again, and the elevator resumed its normal function. I stood up, feeling all the aches across my back. A goose egg formed at the back of my head. When the door opened, I ran out, practically knocking a custodian to the ground. Thinking back at it now, this was probably when I truly had my first panic attack. I remember that feeling of adrenaline in my throat and lungs, that shaking in my legs. I ran until I was at the main thoroughfare of Bakery Park, away from all the buildings, away from anything that could trap me. Even though I was surrounded by guests flowing towards the attractions, I had never felt so alone in my entire life. Aiko was my anchor. She wasn't here to guide me. It was just me on this foreign island where I couldn't properly understand the language or dialect. And a fucking mascot was sending me ominous threats in the theme park app. I sat at a bench, held my head, and just breathed. I was expected to work today, and pretend everything was normal. But everything did not feel normal. It's like Aiko and I had opened a Pandora's box that only we were privy to, and the troubles of the world were going to swallow us up. Over the next 10 minutes, I remember running through all of my options to keep myself calm. Option 1. I could leave. All my stuff was at Nana Obasan's house, and if I wanted to be a dick, I could just grab it and go. But I couldn't do that. How could I leave without Aiko returning? I didn't even know where Aiko truly was at this point. I at least wanted to make sure Aiko was safely back home. And even if I was going to ghost everyone, I would have to book a ferry and then book somewhere to stay. The whole reason I was working at this theme park was because I was broke and couldn't really afford to do those things. In a very real sense, I was kind of trapped here. So I settled on the next option. Option 2. Push through. The only way forward was through. If I could at least work through the rest of the day, maybe I'd get some news from Aiko. Maybe she'd finally call me. Hearing her voice would cool everything down about 1,000%. And when she came back, I'm sure she could explain away the creepy guards and intense CEO as some kind of cultural misunderstanding. There's no way this is all as scary as I'm making it out to be, right? So that's what I told myself. Aiko would call me soon and we could figure this out together. After gathering enough fortitude, I marched back to employee check-in, chanting a mantra in my head. Aiko will call me. I will get through this. Aiko will call me. I will get through this. When I arrived to grab my name tag, my supervisor greeted me kindly. He explained he had already been notified of my promotion. My new role would be extremely busy, and there was a lot to explain, which was music to my ears because I just wanted to occupy myself with anything. Good. I'm glad you're excited because I've got some fun news. He took my keycard and enabled some new permissions. You're going to be working on our brand new attraction today. For the first time ever, we're opening the confection showroom. You mean the abandoned building? Not anymore, he smiled. It'll become your new home. They've made you into a cast member. I was now a cast member, playing a character named Mr. New York at the theme park. They gave me a traditional white baker's costume, complete with a chef hat embroidered with stars and stripes. My direction was to play a stereotypically strict American cooking show judge. I had to evaluate pastry creations assembled by Japanese children on this tiny island. With less than an hour of impromptu training, I was taken to the confection showroom where kids started lining up to show me the virtual cakes, which they had spent all season constructing on their phone. I hated being back at the confection showroom. It reminded me of all the horrors I encountered yesterday, as well as the elevator breakdown I experienced this morning. But my new workload was so dense that the fears quickly became background noise. I embraced the busyness. Hello, Mr. New York, each excitable child would say and hold up their phone. Please judge my work. Thank you. Their digital cakes would be forwarded to my judge console, basically a waist-height touchscreen that let me inspect their make-believe confections. It was up to me to grade their dessert and decide which animation I would trigger on the big hologram in the middle of the showroom. If the kid's cake was elaborate and made with lots of rare flavors, they would play the hologram where Bakery Park's pig mascot, Boo-chan, feasts on their creation.
It's delicious,
the pig would sing, as I applauded the submission and transferred the award. The children in the showroom would laugh and cheer, celebrating their friend who received a 3-star achievement. However, if I received a newbie cake smeared with too much frosting, I would put on my best Simon Cowell frown and trigger an animation where Boo-chan made a joke.
Reminds me of when I ate trash.
The hologram pig would wink, and then eat only half of the kid's cake. The guests would howl with laughter, which was good because I didn't want to be dealing with mopey kids. They seemed to like getting roasted as much as they liked getting praised. It was part of my strict Mr. New York shtick, and although it's hard to admit, it actually became pretty fun. However, there was one boy who was a real pain. He wore a baseball cap with a Pikachu on it. After getting only 1 star, Pika Kid threw a tantrum, knocking over a trash can. Not fair, not fair. You're not even real, you're just a terrible actor. I ignored these comments, and gave him the scores I thought he deserved. But then he relined up again and showed me the same plain strawberry frosting cake. Give me 3 stars, you phony. My mom says you're a stupid foreigner who doesn't belong here anyway. I stayed in character and said, Sorry, kid. The sun can't shine every day. Then this 12-year-old kicked me right in the shin. Surprisingly hard. I stumbled back and tried to regain my composure. I was sorting through the most assertive and age-appropriate scold I could say in Japanese when a loud rumbling came from the floor. The 6 children in line all screamed and hugged the wall. The Pika Kid stared in awe as the LEDs turned on again. A dizzying swirl of pixels slowly formed Boo-chan. The cartoon pig appeared with furrowed brows and raised hackles. Red light shot out of his eyes and mouth, giving him the appearance of a demonic jack-o'-lantern.
Didn't your parents teach you any manners?
The hologram squealed and pointed.
Your cake isn't good enough.
A bolt of electricity shot out of the pig's gloved hand and struck the Pika Kid's hat. It caught on fire. The boy screamed bloody murder, tossed his hat, and scrambled out the entrance door with the rest of the children. I likewise tried to run like a coward, but I tripped on my oversized chef apron. Shit. Before I could speed crawl away, the entrance door sealed shut on its own. The children had escaped, but I was trapped inside. No. When I looked back at Boo-chan, I could see Mashumaro had materialized now as well, floating with his signature smile. The Tanuki wrapped his arm around the snorting pig like they were the best of friends.
Why, hello, James Naka, employee number 604373. Glad to see you are enjoying your work.
I stood up and ran towards the locked door, slamming it over and over with my fists. I should have known some crazy shit was bound to happen again. I was deluded by 3 hours of normalcy and my own wishful thinking.
No need to run, James. We're not going to hurt you.
Mashumaro's eyes were black holes staring right through me.
You've been doing so well, awarding all the hardest working, smartest youngsters with the correct scores.
The confection showroom had a circular walkway around the light panel center. Although the holograms should have been relegated to the center, somehow the mascots were floating past the LEDs and over the railing. Mashumaro floated up to my right, his entire body blocking the walkway. Likewise, Buchan came down on my left, blocking that path as well.
I've agreed with all of your awards.
Buchan patted his belly. It squished like a ball of dough.
It makes my belly feel good.
Mashumaro chuckled.
I'm so happy when my friend is happy. And when I'm happy, my friend is happy. A good system, don't you think?
Both of them approached like they were toying with a mouse. I held out my hands in pitiful defense. Please, let me go. Mashumaro nodded.
If you keep helping us, I'll make sure Aiko gets returned to you safe and sound.
My legs buckled at the sound of my girlfriend's name.
That's right, James.
The Tanuki grinned.
Aiko will be released.
I think my heart missed 4 beats. Released?
But first, you must choose the daily Super Winner.
Buchan bounced off his own bottom with a squeal.
Indeed. You must award a child 4 stars.
Mashumaro pointed at me.
Make sure to pick the cleverest cake maker of all.
They were floating uncomfortably close. I could see the translucence of their pixelated skin and parts of the showroom behind them. From what I could tell, they were still holograms, but I didn't feel safe running through them. Okay, I'll do it. I shut my eyes, willing the nightmare to go away. I brought my hands over my eyes to further shield myself, and that's when I felt the warm, wet spots on my cheeks. How long had I been crying? I must have stood there in darkness, like a child holding bed covers over their face, for over 5 minutes, before I found enough courage to peek between my fingers. When I did, the pig and Tanuki were gone. The entrance door was opened. Outside, the terrified kids were being wrangled by nearby staff. They were taken to a playroom where they were showered with distractions and games. Their parents were awarded several free day passes to apologize for the special malfunction at the new attraction. I spoke to no one and bolted back to the employee welcome center. I was over being traumatized. After seeing a kid's head almost get fried, I had to get word out that something was fucked here. My supervisor was at his desk doing paperwork. Out of all the staff at Bakery Park, I trusted him the most. He was the only one to commend me and call me brave for being the only Westerner to work at such an obscure Japanese place. He'd always liked that Aiko brought me here. Asumi-san, I'm sorry to barge in, I said while literally barging in. But there's a hacker at this theme park. He's hijacked the electronics at the confection showroom. He almost killed a kid. Naku-san, please don't yell. Come in. I entered his tiny office and he shut the translucent door. Several employees at the center looked through the glass. They could see I was freaking out. I didn't care. I wanted everyone to hear me. It's the second time I've been in the showroom where some awful terrorist entity shut the doors and tried to lock me in, I said. It's not safe in there. Terrorist entity? Asumi-san put his papers away. What do you mean? Someone has infiltrated systems around the park and, well, not even just the park. I've gotten threats via Bakery Park Hunt. I opened the official app on my phone. I left it open on his desk, hoping that maybe the corrupted Mashumaro would send something. I've gotten messages here where the hacker has insinuated that he's kidnapped kids on the island. He's even said that he's got Aiko captured somewhere. Aiko Agatsumi, one of your employees, is in danger. Whoa, now slow down. I spoke to Aiko earlier today. She's in Shimato. What? His eyes were calm, unbelieving my incredulity. I hadn't received any text from Aiko since the morning. You spoke to her? I asked. What did she say? She told me what you said in the morning, that she took a medical helicopter to the mainland hospital, and that she'll return by ferry tomorrow. I didn't know how that was possible. Did Aiko actually call him? Did someone mimicking Aiko's voice call him? She told me she was escorting the child you rescued in the forest yesterday. This yarn of confusion was tangling too far. I decided to unravel it a little. Asumi-san, you should know that we never saved any child in a forest. It's a lie we were pressured to say. He looked at me skeptically. But I can see you have a forest stamp on your wrist. I looked at the skin below my left palm. The little insignia literally seemed to glow, drawing attention to itself. Forest. They forced the stamp on me. They forced a forest visitation stamp on you? Yes, the park guards did. He looked at me with particular scrutiny. If I had been able to wash the stamp off my wrist by now, I would have. But soap and water did nothing. Why would they forcibly put a park stamp on your wrist? To maintain a conspiracy, I wanted to say. But I could tell this was already becoming too much. Listen, Asumi-san, forget the stamp. The point is there are kids at risk in this park, and we need to intervene. Naka-san, I appreciate you telling me all this, but I've been specifically instructed not to raise any unnecessary alarm. But this is a necessary alarm. All of the children who've gone missing on this island have been off of the park property. You know that. Asumi-san, with all due respect, you should see the kid who almost lost his head a few minutes ago. Then my phone chirped. It was a message from the Bakery Park Hunt app. The new and improved confection showroom has been restored. Drop by to show off your flavors and earn some rewards. My supervisor looked at the phone, and then at me. Looks like they may have fixed whatever your technical difficulties were. Bullshit, I said in English and then switched back to Japanese. That's impossible. He stared at me, unimpressed. Why don't you go check? I shook my head. There's no way I'm going back there. Naka-san, your shift isn't over. Haven't you been listening to me? A volley of sparks almost killed a kid. I'm not risking my life. Asumi-san stood up and loomed over me. James, let me be frank. You're a talented Westerner. You speak Japanese very well. But in this country, you do not ever crash into an office like you have and perform such an outburst. I'm being very lenient because you're very young and you haven't been here a long time. But trust me, if you did this to the wrong person, you would be fired on the spot. I stood up to match his height. All right then, fire me. No, I will not fire you. And I will not let you leave in the middle of your shift. This is crass and disrespectful to me and everyone who has helped you so far. What would Aiko think, We have norms here that even Americans must obey. Aiko would support my safety above all. He tried to hide a long, exasperated sigh, but he did not hide it very well. If you must insist that you're feeling unsafe, then I'll go with you. The walk back was a wordless, icy cold experience. We didn't even look at each other as we ambulated through the thinning crowds. By the time we reached the banner-strewn confection showroom, it looked like word might have spread about the earlier incident. The crowds had completely left, and I felt like leaving too. I was willing to finish my shift, out of respect for Aiko getting me the job in the first place, but only if I was demoted back to general laborer. I'd rather clean roller coaster puke than face Mashumaro in that locked building again. I told as much to Asumi-san, and he shook his head. You will finish what your new contract requires you to finish. You don't get to change the rules. He entered the confection showroom and beckoned me to follow, but I stayed outside the perimeter of the door. You're going to find a burnt baseball cap with a Pikachu on it, I said, pointing to the center of the room. That's the proof. I'm not making things up. There's something dangerous here. Asumi-san huffed and looked around, unable to find this supposed proof. Naka-san, come inside already. Don't be ridiculous. I told him no. He activated the pre-programmed animations and watched Buchan eat default-shaped cakes. The holograms all worked as they were supposed to. Despite our acrimony, he was still double-checking everything, looking behind each plastic cake display and trash bin. I appreciated that he was at least feigning concern. But regardless, I was staying outside. I crossed my arms and turned away, checking my phone for an update from Aiko. But all I had was the cryptic text from the morning. 9:12 a.m. Something is wrong with Kato. He's making weird, guttural sounds that the doctors don't understand. And he's talking now, but in an old man voice. Like a really old man voice. He keeps saying, "More will come. More will come." I'm really scared. The parents are angry with me. They think I did something to their son. They're not letting me leave. Wherever Aiko was, her phone must have been taken away or powered off. I didn't believe that Asumi-san had received a call from her. Mashumaro claimed he would release Aiko if I obeyed his request, but I didn't trust that hacker terrorist for 1 second. I believed the move here was to wait it out until I could return to Nana Obasan's place for the night. If I hadn't heard from Aiko by then, I'd take a ferry to the mainland the next morning and figure things out from there. Things were getting too crazy. I had to get away from this island. Hey, James. My supervisor's voice echoed from deep within the showroom. Is this what you were talking about? I wish I had just ignored the comment and committed to backing away. I really should have known something was up. But instead, I turned to peek inside the showroom and was met with a smiling hologram of Buchan. The pig only stood a foot away from me. What? The hog's doughy stomach burst into a dozen shimmering tentacles, each writhing and lashing like vicious whips. I didn't physically feel any of the whipping, but seconds after a tentacle slashed through me, it felt like that part of my body had been exposed to an electrical outlet. Within seconds, a painful spasm of electricity surged through my body. I crumpled to the ground. All my limbs seized up, followed by fingers. I couldn't even blink. Asumi-san came over to me quickly and dragged me further into the building. This didn't have to happen, you know? I heard the door close. I heard other machinery activate. My supervisor leaned me up against something and squatted down to meet my eye. He looked tired, sorrowful, as if he was regretting what he was doing, but nonetheless had to do it. He spoke in English like he sometimes did to practice with me. His accent was broken, rushed a little around the edges, but I understood him perfectly well. Fucking Gaijin. Learn to play along. Children. Dozens of children. Maybe hundreds. When I regained consciousness, that's the first thought that entered my mind. Jesus Christ, there's a lot of them down here. And by here, I mean some kind of underground amphitheater with nightmarish rows of seats. Each seat a black cage of interlaced ribs, entrapping a motionless child who'd had their eyes and mouths sealed with tight, shiny cables. It was probably the most horrific thing I'd ever seen. I myself was surrounded by the metal ribs as well, except that my tall, 25-year-old torso extended beyond the smaller cage designed for children. I had a few limbs sticking out. Thank God. Judging by the uniformity of all the other cages, my guess is that I was placed via some automated process that had gone unchecked, which meant that the black cables that should have been sealing my face were instead wrapped around my chin. It was tempting to call for help, to yell and see if someone else would respond. But of course, that might have been suicide. I didn't know where I was. Underground, maybe? I only knew that my supervisor, Usami-san, had paralyzed and sent me here. That bastard. I was stupid to tell him anything. I should have known he was part of the conspiracy among top brass at Bakery Park. They were all complicit in imprisoning the swaths of Japanese kids here. I remember my girlfriend Aiko said that only 3 children had gone missing at the theme park. How wrong we were. Those were clearly just the 3 that the public knew about. I spent the first few minutes totally awestruck by the horror of it all. It was hard to believe I was staring at an inhumane prison designed exclusively for 6 to 12-year-olds. Cruelty incarnate. At the center of the amphitheater-like floor was a heap of LED panels undulating in a faint white glow, supplying light to the rest of the space. I watched patiently as one of the panels became bright pink and produced a hologram of a large cartoon pig with a cinnamon roll for a tail. It was Buchan. The light turned off, but the hologram remained, untethered to roam free. The pig squealed and spoke in aggressive Japanese.
Release capsule 478-97742.
A child's cage only a few rows down from me lifted into the air. Several spider-like legs emerged beneath it and skittered down to Buchan. The pig snorted and inspected the young boy.
Good. Still ripe. Follow me.
The arachnid cradle waddled behind the hologram pig as he marched down an exit. The sound of the spider feet scraping and stabbing the floor echoed outwards until fading away. Good Lord. What have I gotten myself into? With my free hand, I grabbed and twisted at each of the ribs holding my chest in place. The metal was strong and unrelenting, but then I discovered an external hook-shaped appendage, and when I pulled, the whole cage opened. I was free. Count your fucking blessings. Several pinprick sensations stung across my back as I stood up. On my seat, I could see several loosely hanging needles and tubes. IVs? I moved quickly, sliding between the rows of young victims, climbing over their cage casing sometimes. If I wanted to, I could have pulled the same hook appendage and freed several children as well. The thought weighed me down, a small anchor of guilt. But what good would that do? What if they cried out? What if I had to carry one? I had no clue where I was supposed to go. For all I knew, freeing a child might have been condemning them to something far, far worse. No, I was better off going alone, scoping it out. Rescue would have to be figured out later. When I descended past the last row and stepped across the gray, cave-like floor, I could see exits in at least 5 different directions. They were all sealed by tight aperture doors, all except for the tunnel that Buchan entered. I took a deep breath. The LEDs pulsated rhythmically, casting my shadow against the row of young kids. My silhouette stretched into a long, scrawny shape across the helpless forms, like a spindly tree, incapable of supporting anything. There was nothing for me here. I snuck down the tunnel. It was very hard to see in the pure, unassailable darkness. Clearly, the tunnel was designed for beings who could emit their own glow, not for fleshy, human escapees. I kept my fingers sliding along the right wall, marching forward and making sure I didn't trip over anything. Eventually, I did see a mix of glimmering lights at the end of the tunnel. They alternated between blue, yellow, and pink. It might have been Buchan, or more like him, which sent chills down my spine, but I ignored the feeling and edged closer. Grime, soot, and I don't know what else clung to my fingers and clothes as I crawled along the wall. I was still wearing my Mr. New York outfit, which I'm sure was now streaked with God knows what. They might have taken my phone and keys, but at least they left me my costume. I used the chef's hat to wipe sweat from my eyes. The lights danced brightly as I neared the tunnel's exit. It gave the impression of some kind of nightclub or carnival. As I came even closer, I could see indeed it came from a shimmering neon sign. Photonics Bazaar. What the hell? On my immediate right, I saw a space densely packed with cryopod-like chambers. Inside each chamber was the glowing hologram of a child, looking at me with tired, defeated eyes. There seemed to be no one else around at this bazaar. I went up and put my hand on the nearest chamber. The little girl on the other side placed her palm beneath mine. She was saying something frantically, and I could see shimmering, translucent tears trickle down her shimmering, translucent face. I wish I knew how to lip read. I had so many questions. What did they do to you? I stepped away and looked at the sign centered between all these glass chambers. Premium flavors. Chiba region. Half price. I reread the text several times to make sure I translated it correctly. But that's what the word said. This was a stall. A storefront. And as I looked deeper into the grand hall I just entered, I realized I could see dozens of them. Several storefronts, each offering a different variant. Flavors of Yamanashi. Authentic Tokyo taste. Kanagawa flavors. 50% off. My bottom jaw had fallen somewhere along the floor. My hands clasped my head. What the fuck? Through the middle of this bizarre hall was a long, connected row of tables and chairs, like you might find at the center of any food court. Except the furnishings here were clearly designed for beings much larger than humans. I approached the first table and spotted a single chrome bowl left on the edge. Inside, I could see a shimmering mixture of pink and cyan. Pace quickened. I sped down the large, empty hall, trying to process what I was seeing. In between the flavor stalls were shops for all kinds of uncanny silver instruments. Spoons, bowls, knives, corkscrews, and other things I didn't want to look at. And every now and then I'd spot a black column supporting the ceiling. On each column were glowing digital numbers. They said 8:57, like any old alarm clock on Earth. In a few moments, they read 8:58. I slid my way beneath the long cafeteria table and kept a low profile. And I'm glad that I did, because when the clock hit 9 o'clock, all hell broke loose. The ceiling became an LED explosion of sparks and lights, descending hordes of shimmering creatures down into the hall. But they weren't ravenous, bloodthirsty monsters like I was expecting. No. If I had to describe them, I'd say they behaved more like obsessive shoppers at a mall. I watched from the floor as a hologram monkey mascot, covered in donut sprinkles, prepared his shimmering pair of tote bags. There was a bipedal dog, with pancakes for ears, who ran over to some glass-chambered children for sale and started smelling each one. There was even a weasel, made of churros, who was giving out coupons for specific stalls. They were all animals infused with dessert elements, which meant they were likely characters designed at Bakery Park. But did that mean they were all harmless virtual mascots at one point? And somehow they now lived underground, enjoying humans as flavors? I want that fresh boiling from Kanagawa, the one with the glasses. I've heard these creamy types from Shimoto are the best. How much? Where are the 4-star smart ones? I want a new pet, and then I want to eat them when I get bored. I could see their illuminated hooves, paws, and bird feet walk back and forth across the bazaar grounds. They were crowding around close to where I was hiding. Tongue clenched between my teeth, I stayed beneath the tables and skulked forward, putting my heels down before my toes, making as little noise as possible. With their attention on the merchandise, no one seemed to notice a lone human scuttling away between cafeteria benches, but I knew I wasn't safe for long. Once they all started eating, I'd be toast. I crawled from table to table, maintaining momentum until I heard a loud, familiar voice through a loudspeaker.
Friends, old comrades and newly arrived, please gather round for our morning auction.
I could practically hear the sharp teeth inflect on marshmallow lips. It was Mashumaro. A stampede of glowing claws, tails, and feet all gathered at one extension of the hall. I could see pushing among the attendees. Everyone wanted a spot.
Today's auction item goes by the name Shigeru Tanaka. His family has worked at the Japanese embassy for generations. They also own and operate one of the largest contiguous farms in Hokkaido. To inhabit his body would be to experience wealth and luxury among the top 5th percentile of the surface world.
Oohs and ahs arrived in unison.
Shigeru has no siblings, which guarantees you will inherit much, if not all, of his family's exemplary estate and connections. For a vessel of this caliber, the bidding shall begin at 3,000 nodes.
I looked ahead of me, and noticed that the crowds of feet were thinning. Every Glimmer mascot was drawn to the auction. It quickly grew heated. I offer 4,000. 8. 12,000.
12,000 nodes from the fellow in the back.
Mashumaro spoke with proud satisfaction.
12,000 going once. 12,000 going twice.
16. Seizing the opportunity, I crawled further away, only breathing when I needed to. Perhaps, if I kept my head down, I would have found another exit to this bazaar. Perhaps, if I kept my head down, I would have found an alcove to hide in, and learned much more about this place in general. But unfortunately, I did not keep my head down. Not when I heard the screaming. The hysterical, ear-bursting screaming. It came from a kid. An intense empathy cut through my heart. A deep-rooted compassion that went beyond just the care for another human. It was like a mammalian instinct. A primal desire to save the young squeaking thing from an all-too-early death. I couldn't help but poke my head out from under the tables and look back. Sure enough, I could see a human boy, still in the flesh, dangling by his feet. It must have been the ripe one plucked by Buchan not long ago. The living rib cradle had reformed into a hanging post that the kid could not escape.
40,000 nodes. Going once. Going twice.
Gasps of astonishment bubbled through the crowd. Clearly such a bid had not been offered for some time.
Sold. To Mamichi for 44,000. Well done, sir. For those who do not know, Mamichi is one of our oldest progenitors. He's been at this for a long time. You deserve to retire well, old friend.
I could see Mashumaro shake hands with a particularly pixelated-looking hologram. Mamichi looked like he had lived inside an 8-bit game all his life. I will enjoy retiring as an 8-year-old affluent progeny. I will ensure our island stays safe. Unanimous cheers drowned out the small boy's cries. Mashumaro initiated a long, mechanical lancet to descend from the ceiling. It resembled an oversized syringe. I watched helplessly as the needle entered the boy's neck and sucked the life from his eyes. Quite literally, because the syringe chamber suddenly filled with a digital life form of the boy. His life essence had been removed and hologramized.
All right,
Mashumaro smiled.
Brace yourself.
An antenna was stuck inside the center of Mamichi's pixelated body, absorbing him inside the metal instantly. Then, the needle still inside the boy's neck lit up like a flash of lightning, and suddenly the lifeless boy was awake again, complete with bright yellow eyes and a sinister grin. The possessed child was deposited back into a walking black cradle amidst a final round of applause.
Thank you all for attending,
Mashumaro hollered.
Let us bid farewell to Mamichi as he enters the elevator.
My attention was rapt. Elevator? The spidery cradle walked over to an indented circle on the floor. Puffs of dust shot out as the circle lifted by a foot. It was a platform. Above, I could see a correspondingly large circle open up on the ceiling. Little mandala patterns lit up around the perimeter. An elevator. Right here, right now. Maybe it was my overconfident youth, or maybe it was because I had just been exposed to a new definition of hell. But I felt like I had to do it. I had to take a chance. My plan for stealth was all wishful thinking anyways, whereas this mad dash had a very real chance of escape. When the platform lifted 3 feet, I bolted out from under the table and broke into a sprint. By the time any of the hologram mascots noticed me, I was already within leaping distance.
What is that? A human? What is it doing here?
My jump could have been better timed. I maybe could have landed on the circle more cleanly, but I grabbed hold of the edge. I was still on. Pulling for my life, I hoisted myself up onto the lifting platform. The only thing on board was the black stationary cradle. Inside it was an 8-year-old who leered at me with menacing eyes and a frozen smile.
James Naka, employee number 604373. Is that you?
I looked to my left and saw the hovering, bewildered face of Mashumaro. He levitated alongside the platform as it raised.
Did you forget I could float?
The marshmallow tanuki snapped his finger, and the elevator stopped, but not until we were 3 stories above the ground. I had nowhere to run. Shit.
What a surprise to see you here. I was saving your auction for the off-season. No one wants an ancient 25-year-old. Were you trying to save yourself the same embarrassment?
I fell to my knees and begged, keeping my hands up high over my head. I didn't know what else to do. Please, I won't tell anyone about any of this. Just let me go.
Won't tell anyone.
Mashumaro enjoyed wallowing in his own laughter.
The same way you wouldn't tell anyone about where you found Kato?
He pointed at my wrist with a glowing stamp. Forest. It seared in pain.
The same way you agreed to work at the confection showroom?
He slapped a floppy chef's hat off my head. It fell into the crowds below.
James, I like you. I really do. And I gave you many chances to play along. But it's too late now, my friend.
The metallic arm holding the syringe descended from the ceiling again. I could hear it whirring behind my head. No. Please, no.
You've besmirched yourself, James. And this public display has likely voided your auction. If I'm being honest.
I could hear Momichi's spider cradle stand again. Its limbs clawed into my back, holding me in place. I held my hands together as tightly as I could. I closed my eyes. Please, just send me home. I spent an eternity waiting for an obliterating sting at my neck, or for Mashumaro to zap me into dust. But nothing happened.
Send you home, huh?
Mashumaro spoke pensively.
You know, that might not be a bad idea.
When I opened my eyes, I could see an antenna poking inside Mashumaro's body. He giggled, as if the metal prong could tickle his white belly.
Let's try. Let's send you back to America.
I could feel a long, thin needle delicately enter my neck. What? Mashumaro giggled some more as the antenna grew bright.
Not alone, of course.
The shock in my neck came with such force I felt like I'd been beheaded. I reached with my arms, but quickly lost all feeling. Before I knew what was happening, all I could see was white. Colorless white. I had gotten my wish. I was free. My vision was working again, and I could feel the ground beneath my back. I was in the confection showroom. But as I got up to stand, I realized none of the movements were made by me. My body moved and walked and breathed and swallowed, but I wasn't in control at all. Some version of Mashumaro had taken over the executive functions of my brain. I watched pathetically through my own eyes, as this photonic monster controlled every muscle I flexed, and every word I said. Immediately on the surface, I met with the big brass at Bakery Park. Mr. Sadu and Kaibin. They congratulated me on a job well done as a cast member, and agreed I should be given administrative control of installing the Bakery Park franchise somewhere in the US.
You've proven yourself to us, Naka-san. You should be very proud.
I left on the ferry the next day, without saying goodbye to Nana Obasan, and without ever reaching out or texting Aiko in any way. Aiko, if you're reading this, please DM me. I never wanted to leave you in the dust. Across several days, I watched Mashimaru delete nearly all contacts from my phone and my social media. In less than a week, he had personally insulted every meaningful contact in Japan and America I knew, burning every friendship, relationship, and acquaintanceship I ever had. All my connections were purged, save for my new managers at Bakery Park. It was fucking devastating. I was no longer a happy-go-lucky English teacher traveling the world to discover himself. I was an entrepreneur, loaded with seed money to start a theme park in America. Mashimaru moved me to California, to a swanky apartment building in Los Angeles. To maintain the illusion of humanness, he even reached out to my mom and dad. Ironically, my parents loved the change. They said I was so driven now. They were amazed how I could afford to stay anywhere and how I was so close with such successful businessmen in Japan. I wanted to scream at my folks, who, by the way, never got along with the old me. I wanted to tell them they were supporting the worst, most sociopathic version of myself. But of course, I had no voice in the matter. I couldn't do anything. Every now and then, Mashimaru would march my body to a washroom and have it stare at itself. He would smile, and I could see the disturbing shimmer in his eyes. "What a good boy you've been," he'd say. "Kindness is never wasted." Sometimes I'd watch him converse with other new bodies, the term he uses for photonically controlled humans, and they would talk about how their operations were going in Japan. He even met with Kato. Yes, the same Kato that I rescued with Aiko at the start of all this. Even though Kato was just a kid, he spoke with an old man's voice, and was already involved in his family's shipyard business. It was disgusting just how far this conspiracy went, and how many normal, flesh-and-blood people were supporting the photonic agenda. Bakery Park Sadu-san, Kaibin, and even my supervisor, Usami-san, were all just normal people, happy to upend their morals to keep their positions of power. Throughout Japan, I learned photonics were kidnapping about a dozen kids per day, which wasn't helping with Japan's population crisis. And in America, they were now starting to capture a dozen kids per week. And it was only going to get worse. Mashimaru had amassed a team of new bodies to buy some land in Anaheim. The US version of Bakery Park is slated to be built sometime in the next 5 years. I had to endure every minute of every meeting, feel the sweat on every greasy handshake, taste the burn of every fruity vanilla cognac I would never drink. I had to watch myself become a soulless, corporate monster, intent on ending humanity. Up until a few months ago, I thought my life was truly over. And then I discovered my only saving grace. Each night when Mashimaru finally went to bed, my old body would briefly disconnect from him. For a long time, there wasn't much I could do, because I couldn't control my old body either. But after a lot of effort focusing on my fingers and my toes, I was slowly able to reassert some control. Recently, I was able to start walking during Mashimaru's REM sleep, and only even more recently was I able to start writing on his laptop. Mashimaru so far has no recollection of what I do during his rest, and I'd like to keep it that way. I've purposely limited myself to only an hour or two each night. I've stealthily shot emails to a few select people through an Outlook account I've managed to keep hidden, but so far the responses have been fruitless. I've even created a secret WhatsApp to try and reconnect with friends who might help me, but they all think I've become a selfish, money-hungry shill. And so, over the last few days, I decided to type up my story. This story, and release it to the world. I figured if I started at the beginning and explained the whole situation, then someone new might finally help me. It's been nothing but dwindling hope and misery ever since Aiko and I saved Kato from the confection showroom. A disaster of events. And you have every right to disbelieve me and think I'm crazy. Hell, I know I would. But if you're that person who has read my whole story, and you're willing to sneak massive packages into an address in LA without alerting Mashimaro, please DM me now. My goal is to get my life back. My goal is to unveil the grand photonic conspiracy to the world. My goal is to find out what happened to Aiko Agatsuma, and save her if it's not too late. Please help. God bless. Thank you for reading. James Naka. Become a channel member today for early access, bonus videos, and special emojis only available to members. Check out the description below or click the join button for more info. If you'd like another way to help support the channel, please consider joining my Patreon page at patreon.com/JordanGroupeHorror. As a patron, you'll get access to bonus videos and content. You'll be credited at the end of every video going forward, and if you decide to stay for 3 months, I'll name a character after you which will be featured in a Hollow's End story. Links to join the Patreon are in the description. Thanks everyone for listening. Please like, subscribe, and comment to help the channel continue to grow. And see you again next time at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Hope you have a great night.